It begins with a question no one expected Hollywood to ask out loud. Why did Jennifer Salk, one of the most powerful executives in the entertainment industry, finally snap? People inside Amazon MGM studios are still whispering about it. Some say they heard her voice echo down the hallway. Others say they saw the look on her face before she closed the boardroom door, a look that told them something irreversible was happening behind that glass. And a few, only a handful, claim they were in the room when it happened. When Jennifer Salk, Hollywood's famously composed studio chief, rose from her chair, looked directly at Meghan Markle, and said 7 words that would change the trajectory of Meghan's entire entertainment career. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But before we get to the moment that scorched through Hollywood like a lightning strike, let's pull back the curtain to the minute before it all happened, when everyone still thought this meeting was going to be routine, when people still believed that even though tensions were high, even though Meghan's reputation was shaky, the studio would still move forward with caution, professionalism, and subtlety. Instead, what came next pushed everything off the rails. Picture it. A long rectangular boardroom, cold overhead lights shining down on polished wood, the faint hum of air conditioning making the room feel more sterile than usual. Executives in tailored suits sat stiffly around the table, hands folded, eyes unreadable. Assistants waited in the corners with laptops open, ready to type every word. Phones were face down, silenced. No one dared make small talk. No one even dared clear their throat. Because this wasn't just any meeting. This was the meeting. The meeting that would determine the future of Meghan Markle's partnership with Amazon MGM Studios. A partnership that had already consumed millions of dollars, countless hours, an entire PR team's sanity, and the patience of half the executive floor. But no one expected Meghan to burst through the door unannounced, especially because she was never supposed to be there. And that's where everything began to crack. Why did she attend a meeting she wasn't invited to? What did she expect to find behind that door? And more importantly, what did she think she could still salvage? These are the questions that ring in the air before anyone even speaks. Because once Meghan steps into the room, everything changes. The temperature drops, conversations freeze, and Jennifer Salk's expression slowly shifts from neutrality to disbelief. And then to something else. Something sharper. Something colder. The kind of expression that says, "Not today." But this isn't where the story begins, even though it feels like the spark that ignited the fire. No, this moment is the result of months of frustration, years of behind-the-scenes tension, and a pattern of behavior that Hollywood tolerated just long enough before deciding to push back. Quietly at first, then firmly, then publicly, and now, finally, decisively. Because this isn't just a feud. This isn't a misunderstanding. This isn't Hollywood gossip cooked up by anonymous sources. This is the culmination of a long, complicated war between Meghan Markle's ambitions and the entertainment industry's expectations. A war that started shortly after the royal exit. A war that intensified when Meghan entered Hollywood again, not as an actress this time, but as a producer, a visionary, a storyteller, or at least that's how she framed it. Hollywood, however, saw something very different. And Jennifer Salk, the woman who oversees one of the most powerful studios in the world, was watching closely. She'd given Meghan chances. Multiple chances. More chances than most industry newcomers ever receive. And still, somehow, each opportunity collapsed under the weight of Meghan's demands, delays, excuses, and contradictions. The boardroom meeting was simply the breaking point. Now here's where the story gets even more intriguing. Before Meghan arrived unexpectedly, Jennifer Salk had a folder in front of her. Plain, thin, harmless looking. Just a few sheets of paper clipped neatly together. Nothing flashy. But inside that folder was a compiled report of everything that had gone wrong. Everything Amazon MGM had quietly tolerated. Every missed deadline. Every script revision never delivered. Every conflict with staff. Every meeting where Meghan arrived late, or not at all. Every promise she made that somehow evaporated moments later. And most importantly, every warning sign. The folder was a map of everything Jennifer Salk had allowed to continue long past the point where another executive might have ended the partnership. But Jennifer isn't known for impulsive decisions. She's known for patience, diplomacy, and the ability to manage difficult talent with grace. which is precisely why what she did next shocked the room. But before we get there, let's slow down. Because you need the full picture. You need to understand just how much pressure has been building behind the scenes. You need to understand exactly why the entertainment industry has reached this point of no return. Why studios whisper the same phrase behind closed doors. She's not worth the chaos. Why producers tell assistants to find a window to escape meetings with her. Why executives sigh as soon as her name is mentioned. And why, on this specific day, in this specific room, Jennifer Salk decided enough was enough. But here's something you might not know. This confrontation wasn't spontaneous. Weeks earlier, small cracks began to show inside the studio. Tiny complaints from staff. Confusion over Meghan's latest proposal. Red flags from script analysts. Negotiation missteps. Tension between teams. Disorganized communication. And a series of meetings where Meghan's royal titles, global influence, and public power dominated conversations more than the actual content. It wasn't about creativity anymore. It wasn't about storytelling. It wasn't about delivering value. It became about Meghan's image. Her control. Her ego. Hollywood has dealt with egos before. Massive ones. Impossible ones. Legendary ones. But ego without results? That's the one thing the industry never forgives. Because you can be difficult, you can be demanding, you can even be a hurricane if you deliver. But when you don't deliver, when all you offer is chaos, when all you create is drama, then you become a liability. And in an industry governed by budgets, branding, and public perception, liabilities get cut fast. But Jennifer Salk waited. She gave Meghan time, grace, advice, opportunities. But none of it mattered. Because while the studio was trying to create clarity, Meghan was creating storms. So now the real question becomes, what exactly triggered this explosive confrontation? What did Meghan say when she barged into that meeting? What was her tone? What demand pushed Jennifer Salk to her limit? What exactly was in that folder? And what 7 words did Jennifer say that reportedly ended Meghan Markle's Hollywood future? These are the questions pulling us deeper into the story. And we're only at the beginning. Because as Meghan takes a seat at the table, uninvited and unprepared, she tries to act confident, calm, in control, like she belongs in the room, like she still owns the narrative. But she doesn't notice the shift in atmosphere. She doesn't notice the unreadable looks. She doesn't notice Jennifer's tightened posture. And she definitely doesn't notice that the executives seem far more nervous for her than she is for herself. Because they know what's coming. She doesn't. Someone clears their throat. An assistant opens her laptop. A producer nervously adjusts his glasses. Everyone stares at Jennifer, waiting. Jennifer doesn't look away from Meghan. Not for a second. She studies her with a level of stillness that feels like the sound before thunder. Then she finally speaks. But not to Meghan. To everyone else. Let's begin, she says, her voice so steady it unnerves the entire room. After that, the meeting takes a turn so sharp it feels almost cinematic. And what unfolds next will ripple far beyond Amazon MGM studios. It will ripple across agencies, PR firms, production circles, directors' chairs, and even across the ocean to Buckingham Palace. Because when Jennifer Salk finally opens her folder, everyone knows something irreversible is about to happen. Something that will define the rest of Meghan Markle's Hollywood story. And as the first page flips, Meghan leans forward, assuming she's about to receive praise, negotiation updates, perhaps even a creative green light. Instead, she gets the shock of her career. But the moment that truly ends everything. The moment that freezes Meghan in her chair. The moment that sends her Hollywood reputation spiraling. Happens after page 3. And trust me, what Jennifer Salk says next will set the tone for every chapter of what comes after. Because this is where the real story begins. And what comes next? Well, that is something no one in that room expected. Not even Meghan. Not even Jennifer. And definitely not Hollywood. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. The chapter opens with the question that froze everyone in their seats that morning. Why did Meghan Markle walk into a meeting she wasn't invited to? Acting as if she owned the studio. It wasn't just unusual. It wasn't just unexpected. It was baffling. Because on that particular morning, Amazon MGM executives had intentionally scheduled a closed-door session without Meghan. A session meant to privately assess the viability of their partnership, review internal reports, and map out a path forward that avoided further chaos. It was supposed to be an organized, confidential, strategic meeting. No drama, no distractions. Yet drama walked through the door wearing expensive heels and carrying a designer tote. The moment Meghan appeared, her entrance wasn't quiet. It wasn't discreet. It wasn't even subtle. She pushed the door open with the kind of certainty usually reserved for studio heads or award-winning directors. Her posture said she belonged. Her expression said she expected applause. Her pace said she believed she was the centerpiece of the room. But the room didn't respond that way. Executives stiffened. Assistants exchanged rapid glances. A few people instinctively straightened their notes as if bracing for impact. And Jennifer Sock, hands folded neatly on the table, simply blinked once, slowly. A blink that looked far too calm. The dangerous kind of calm. But here's the part that almost no one outside the studio knew. Meghan had been told not to come. Emails had been sent. Calendars had been updated. Assistants had relayed messages. The boundaries were clear, the intent unmistakable. This meeting was not for Meghan. It wasn't a brainstorming session. It wasn't a pitch. It wasn't a collaboration. It was a status review, and one she was deliberately excluded from to avoid unnecessary conflict. So what pushed her to show up anyway? Did she think she could change the narrative by walking in with confidence? Did she assume the executives would soften the moment she arrived? Or did she fear the meeting was about her, and she wanted to control the outcome? Whatever the reason, one thing was unmistakable. Her presence immediately changed the energy of the room. Not in the way she expected, but in the way a sudden fire alarm changes the mood at a quiet dinner party. The executives were shocked. Jennifer was silent. And Meghan, misreading the tension entirely, gave a bright smile. "Good morning. I thought I'd jump in," she announced, placing her tote down with a soft thud that somehow sounded louder than thunder. Jump in. As if she was joining a casual brainstorming session. As if this was her right, not her intrusion. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, long, thick, suffocating. A silence filled with unspoken words, unvoiced irritation, and heavy glances bouncing around the table. Meghan didn't notice. Or maybe she did. But her confidence didn't falter. She pulled out a chair, sat down at the table, and crossed her legs with the ease of someone who had talked herself into believing she belonged there. Her posture said she was ready to guide the meeting. To impress. To reclaim control. But control was the one thing she no longer had. Jennifer finally leaned back in her chair, not aggressively, not dramatically, just enough to signal something fundamental. She was not happy. Now here's where the real story begins. To understand why the room reacted this way, we need to rewind just a little. Because this meeting wasn't random. It was the result of weeks, months, of mounting tension inside Amazon MGM studios. It started with small issues. Late-night emails that contradicted the previous day's discussions, abrupt changes to project direction, last-minute demands that derailed schedules. At first, the studio tried to accommodate her. After all, they believed they were working with someone who had global star power, undeniable influence, and a unique storytelling platform. But over time, the issues grew louder. Missed script deadlines, unusable pitch drafts, concepts that changed every week, meetings derailed by tangents, people leaving the room in tears. And perhaps the most concerning of all, Meghan believed every setback was someone else's fault. Script not finished on time? Blame the creative team. Pitch not approved? Blame the executives for not getting her vision. Production delays? Blame scheduling conflicts. Negative feedback? Blame internal bias. It became a pattern, a predictable cycle, a storm that returned each week, each time with a new name. Executives were exhausted. Assistants were overwhelmed. Producers were disillusioned. But the moment they realized the partnership was becoming unmanageable was when Meghan started insisting that meetings include what she called brand alignment moments. Long segments where she discussed her image, her global influence, her philanthropic missions, her public narrative, her media coverage. These discussions ate up hours. Literal hours. One producer later joked privately. It felt less like a meeting and more like attending a one-woman TED Talk. So when Meghan walked into the boardroom uninvited, the stunned faces around the table weren't just because she was unexpected. They were because she represented the very chaos the meeting had been designed to avoid. Jennifer knew it. The executives knew it. The assistants definitely knew it. But Meghan didn't. At least, not yet. Jennifer finally spoke. "Meghan," she said calmly, "you weren't scheduled for this session." The words were polite, measured, professional, but they carried weight. Heavy weight. A lesser person might have apologized, stepped back, or at the very least acknowledged the boundary. But Meghan didn't flinch. "I know," she said confidently, "but I think it's important for me to be here. We need to be aligned on everything moving forward." Aligned. The word floated in the air like a misplaced feather. Soft, unthreatening, yet completely tone-deaf in context. The room knew this wasn't about alignment. It was about control. And the worst part? Meghan truly believed she still had it. Jennifer slowly folded her hands, the folder still untouched before her. Her eyes didn't leave Meghan's face. "We'll be discussing internal evaluations today," she said. "It's not a creative session." There it was. A second chance. A gentle pushback. A subtle invitation for Meghan to step out gracefully. But once again, Meghan didn't. Instead, she leaned forward. "That's exactly why I need to be here," she said. "I want to hear everything firsthand." Firsthand. Like she was the CEO. Like she was the one in charge. In that moment, something visible shifted in Jennifer's expression. A tightening of the jaw. A slight narrowing of the eyes. Not anger. Jennifer rarely showed that. But resolve. A firm, decisive, calculated resolve. You could feel it from across the room. But Meghan either didn't feel it or didn't understand it. Because she continued speaking, unaware of the storm she was walking into. She began talking about her new vision for the project, dropping phrases like global impact, modern empowerment, and inspirational influence. She talked about her brand, her audience, her media reach, her recent interviews, her philanthropic ventures, her upcoming appearances. She talked so much that she didn't notice Jennifer giving a tiny nod to her assistant. A nod that said we're moving forward. A nod that said nothing Meghan was saying mattered anymore. A nod that signaled the start of the meeting, whether Meghan was ready or not. Jennifer reached for the folder. The entire room inhaled at the same time. Quietly. Barely. But enough. Meghan kept talking until the sound of the folder's metal clip opening echoed through the room like a crack of lightning. She stopped mid-sentence. Finally, Jennifer didn't look up. She read the first line on the first page slowly, deliberately, letting every syllable settle into the air. It wasn't an opinion. It wasn't speculation. It wasn't gossip. It was a documented performance report. Cold, neutral, factual, and devastating. The first sentence alone was enough to silence the entire room. Yet it wasn't even the harshest part. Not by a long shot. Jennifer's voice remained steady as she read. Unmet deliverables. Repeated delays. Communication inconsistencies. Team disruption. Budgetary concerns. Each point fell like a stone into a still pond, sending ripples of tension across the table. Meghan blinked. Twice. For the first time since walking in, her composure wavered. She tried to interrupt. "Actually," she began. Jennifer didn't lift her eyes. She simply raised her hand slightly. A gesture that said, "I'm not finished." And she wasn't. Because page 1 was only the beginning. The executives braced themselves. Meghan cleared her throat nervously. Jennifer turned to page 2. And that's where the most shocking entries began. A list of internal complaints. Some anonymous. Some signed. Some describing meetings that ended in chaos. Some describing behavior that left team members confused, intimidated, or overwhelmed. These weren't petty notes. These were serious red flags. Meghan's posture stiffened. Her jaw tightened. Her breath caught. And Jennifer didn't stop. The folder was full. Too full. Far too full for someone who had only been working with the studio for a relatively short period of time. But the moment that shook the room the hardest wasn't in the complaints. It wasn't in the missed deadlines. It wasn't in the communication breakdowns. It was in the final line of the third page. A line that made one executive gasp softly. A line that made Meghan's eyes widen. A line that changed the entire trajectory of the room. And here's the most important part. The line wasn't from Amazon staff. It wasn't from producers. It wasn't from directors. It was from someone outside the studio. Someone with influence. Someone with credibility. Someone with a reputation Hollywood respects deeply. And when Jennifer read that line aloud, it didn't just silence Meghan. It changed her fate. But what exactly did that line say? What did Jennifer read that made even the executives shift uncomfortably in their chairs? And why did that single sentence, just one, carry more weight than the entire folder combined? You'll see soon. Because what was revealed next didn't just expose cracks. It exposed fractures. And those fractures were about to shatter everything Meghan thought she still controlled. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. It starts with a sound no one expected to hear in that room. A soft, stunned laugh. Meghan's laugh. Not a joyful laugh. Not a confident laugh. But the kind of laugh people make when they're cornered and trying desperately to hold on to control. That laugh was the first sign that Meghan had no idea how bad things were about to get. Because the moment Jennifer closed the folder again, the room went rigid. You could feel the air tighten. You could feel the tension crawling up the walls. You could feel the weight of everything that had just been revealed hanging over the table like a storm cloud that refused to move. But Meghan, still clinging to the illusion that she could turn things around, leaned forward, forcing a smile as she addressed the room. "I think there must be some misunderstanding," she said. "These notes don't reflect what was actually happening. There were circumstances. A lot of circumstances. Circumstances. A word she relied on more than results. The executives didn't respond. They didn't nod. They didn't soften. They didn't even look at each other. They simply waited. Waited for Jennifer to take the lead again, because everyone knew this wasn't going to be a negotiation. This was going to be a reckoning. Jennifer didn't speak right away. She didn't have to. The silence alone was already doing half the work. She looked at Meghan the way a surgeon looks at a patient before a difficult procedure. Carefully, thoughtfully, with the awareness that what happens next can't be undone. Then she finally asked the question that made Meghan's smile wobble. "Meghan," Jennifer said, "before we go any further, can you tell us, in your own words, what direction you believe your project is taking?" It was a simple question. Neutral, professional, measured. But also the one question Meghan was most unprepared to answer. Because for months, she'd spoken in grand phrases, broad strokes, sweeping visions that sounded inspiring but lacked structure. She talked about empowerment, impact, inspiration, transformation, but never about the specifics. Never the tangible, never the practical, never the deliverables. And now, faced with that question in a room full of people who needed actual answers, she froze. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then tried again. "Well," she began, "the project is evolving. My team and I have been exploring ways to ensure that the story connects to modern audiences, especially women. And, well, I think the creative direction is still flexible. That's the beauty of it. Flexible." Another word she used often. Too often. The executives didn't react, but you could feel their inner reactions. The exhaustion. The skepticism. The subtle eye twitches from people who had heard the same vague explanations for months. Jennifer didn't look surprised. "Flexible," she repeated slowly. "Meghan, we respect creative evolution. But evolution requires progress. And for 5 months, we've seen movement sideways, not forward." That line hit the room like an unexpected slap. Meghan tensed. Sideways, not forward. No one had said it that bluntly before. But this was the moment where everything shifted from uncomfortable to undeniable. Because now Jennifer wasn't just summarizing a report. She was addressing the root problem. Something the entire studio had been avoiding saying out loud. The project wasn't stalled because of circumstances. The project wasn't delayed because of external challenges. The project wasn't unstable because of creative uncertainty. It was stalled because it didn't have a leader. At least, not one the studio could rely on. Before Meghan could respond, Jennifer gestured to a producer 2 seats down, one of the few people who had worked directly under Meghan's creative management. "Would you mind sharing your experience?" Jennifer asked. The producer's face paled. He hadn't expected to be pulled in this early. He sat up straighter, cleared his throat, and adjusted his glasses with slightly trembling fingers. "Well," he began carefully, "the direction has shifted several times. We've had 8 versions of the concept pitch in the last 3 months, each one contradicting the previous one. And each time, our deadlines had to be reset." Meghan stiffened. "That's not accurate," she said sharply. But the producer continued, gently but firmly. "I understand creative changes," he said. "We all do. But each time we tried to establish a structure, Meghan added new elements or removed essential ones. And when we asked for clarification, the direction changed again the next day. He paused. And when we finally tried to lock a version to present to the senior team, it was pulled again. This time Meghan's voice cracked slightly. I pulled it because it wasn't ready. The producer hesitated. With respect, every time we believed it was ready, Meghan changed it again. Sometimes for reasons we couldn't follow. Sometimes without explanation. One executive shifted uncomfortably. Another exhaled softly, as if finally hearing someone say what the entire team had been whispering for weeks. Meghan's frustration began to surface. I changed things because they weren't meeting the vision, she replied, leaning forward. Jennifer's voice cut in. Which vision? The room went silent. Jennifer continued. You've presented multiple visions, Meghan. Multiple themes. Multiple directions. We've tried to support each one, but none of them have been consistent for more than a week. The sentence landed hard, because it wasn't just a critique. It was the truth. A truth everyone in the room already knew. Meghan tried to steady her voice. I'm allowed to refine. That's how creatives work. Jennifer remained perfectly calm. Yes, creatives refine, but they also deliver. And nothing has been delivered. You could almost hear the oxygen leave Meghan's lungs. Because this wasn't criticism. This wasn't advice. This was accountability. And accountability was something she wasn't used to receiving. Not in Hollywood, and certainly not in the world she came from before stepping into the entertainment industry for the second time. But Jennifer wasn't done. She tapped the folder lightly. We've given you time. We've given you resources. We've given you freedom. We've given you a team committed to helping shape your idea into something commercially viable. But at every stage, the work has gone backward. Backward. Another word that cut deeply. Meghan's voice turned sharper. That's unfair. Jennifer raised one eyebrow, not out of disrespect, but out of measured disbelief. What part is unfair? She asked. It wasn't a challenge. It was an invitation. An invitation for Meghan to own something, anything. But Meghan didn't. Instead, she pivoted. If the team couldn't handle the direction I wanted to take, that's not my fault, she said. I've been in this industry longer than some of them. My standards may be higher. The producer sank slightly in his chair, humiliated. And that was the moment the temperature in the room truly changed. Not because Meghan said something cruel, but because she revealed something far more damaging. She still didn't understand the gap between her perception and the studio's reality. She didn't understand that Hollywood doesn't move on ego. It moves on deliverables, on collaboration, on professionalism, on consistency, on results. Jennifer finally looked directly at Meghan, her tone neutral, but her words sharp enough to split the table in half. This is not about standards, she said. This is about responsibility. The room froze. Responsibility. The one word Meghan had been avoiding since the start. Jennifer continued. And this brings us to the pitch you've been developing. The pitch that was supposed to be the anchor of your entire partnership with us. A few executives straightened instinctively. The pitch. The infamous pitch. The one that had caused more confusion, more revisions, more circular meetings than any project the studio had handled that year. Meghan, Jennifer said slowly. Would you like to present your final version? Meghan blinked. My final version? Yes, Jennifer said. You emailed yesterday evening saying it was complete. Complete. A word Meghan had used 5 times in the last 2 months. Each time, the version that followed was different from the one before. Meghan hesitated. Well, she said, yes, but I was still refining it this morning. There are a few adjustments I'm planning to make. Jennifer didn't react. Do you have the current version with you? Another hesitation. It's not in presentable shape yet. The executives exchanged tiny, almost imperceptible glances. Jennifer closed the folder. I see, she said quietly. Meghan knew she had lost footing, but she didn't know how much. Not yet. Jennifer reached for a document. Not the folder, but a separate sheet of paper. The one that contained the internal review of Meghan's pitch. Before you arrived, she said, we reviewed your last officially submitted version. And I will be honest, Meghan, the room's response was not good. Meghan bristled. It's visionary, she insisted. Jennifer met her eyes evenly. It's confusing. Meghan's breath caught. Jennifer didn't soften. It's unfocused. Another hit. It's inconsistent. Another. And most importantly. She paused. It's not marketable. That one stung the most. Because at the end of the day, Hollywood is a business. And Meghan's pitch wasn't just creatively unstable. It was a financial liability. Meghan tried to speak, but her voice faltered. What does that mean? It means, Jennifer said, that no director would sign on to this. No distributor would push it. No marketing team could sell it. And no audience could follow it. Silence. Dead, suffocating, unflinching silence. But before Meghan could respond, before she could defend, justify, or redirect, Jennifer placed the document flat on the table. Which brings me to the most critical point of all, she said. The room braced. And then comes the sentence that changed the entire tone of the meeting. Your pitch didn't just fail with us. It was rejected by an external reviewer. Meghan's head snapped up. What reviewer? Jennifer tapped the page. A senior executive from another major studio. Meghan's eyes widened. Who? Jennifer read the sentence slowly. She said, and I quote, "This pitch is structurally unsound and creatively incoherent. It lacks direction, cohesion, and a clear narrative purpose." The room stopped breathing, because that one sentence had more weight than anything in Jennifer's folder. This wasn't internal criticism. This wasn't studio politics. This wasn't an Amazon complaint. This was an industry verdict. Someone outside Amazon. Someone respected. Someone with influence. And Meghan knew that if another studio had already rejected her pitch, her Hollywood prospects were far more fragile than she wanted to believe. But this wasn't the worst part. Jennifer flipped the page. There's more. And what came next would shake Meghan even deeper. Because the external reviewer wasn't just any executive. She was someone Meghan had once desperately hoped to work with. And her review wasn't just negative. It was brutal. But what she wrote next wasn't just devastating. It was personal. And that's where Chapter 3 begins. Because what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. It began with a single line that made Meghan Markle freeze in her chair. A line she had not expected. A line she had not anticipated. A line that made the confident facade she wore for months crack almost instantly. Because this wasn't a critique from an Amazon MGM insider. It wasn't a polite suggestion from a producer or a concerned HR representative. This was the hard truth from someone whose opinion carried weight across Hollywood. Someone whose name alone could make or break careers. Meghan, Jennifer Sock began, her voice measured, calm, yet dripping with precision. The external review we commissioned calls your project unfilmable. The words echoed through the room like a gunshot in an empty hall. Unfilmable. Think about that. A term so simple, yet so damning. It crystallized every doubt, every criticism, every whispered complaint into one undeniable fact. What Meghan thought was a promising, visionary project was now officially labeled as impossible to produce. The air in the boardroom thickened. The assistants' fingers froze above their laptops. The producers' brows furrowed. And Meghan sat there, blinking, trying to reconcile the words she had just heard with the image of herself she had carefully curated over months. How can it be unfilmable? Meghan finally stammered, her voice just above a whisper. I've been working with the team, shaping it, guiding it. We've been evolving it. Jennifer's eyes didn't flinch. She leaned slightly forward, her hands folded over the folder that had already caused so much tension. Evolving it is not enough, Meghan, she said. The report is clear, structurally unsound, conceptually inconsistent, lacks cohesion and narrative clarity. No director would take it. No production team could execute it. And, frankly, no audience would follow it. It was more than just a critique. It was a verdict, a Hollywood death sentence in polite, professional language. And Meghan could feel it. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. Months of effort, millions in studio resources, hours of negotiations, and her meticulously crafted brand, all of it hanging by a thread. She opened her mouth again, but no words came. The carefully rehearsed defenses she had used in previous meetings, the justifications she had prepared, the polished explanations, all of it failed to materialize. Jennifer Sock, as always, was calm, unshaken. She had been here before with difficult talent, with high-profile actors and producers who thought the world revolved around them. But Meghan was different. Meghan had walked into the room with an aura of entitlement, a belief that reputation alone could carry her projects to success. And now, That aura was beginning to crumble. Jennifer tapped the folder lightly. "I want to go through this systematically," she said. "Page by page. Note by note. Every concern highlighted in the report has been validated by both internal and external sources." Meghan swallowed hard. Her confidence was evaporating, replaced by a creeping panic. She tried to speak, tried to interject, tried to salvage even a sliver of authority. "This isn't fair," she finally burst out. No one understands the vision like I do. You're not seeing the bigger picture." The room remained silent, not out of disrespect, but out of sheer disbelief. Not a single person interrupted Jennifer, not even Meghan's own producers, who had been silently bracing for this moment. Jennifer leaned forward, eyes locking with Meghan's. "The bigger picture doesn't matter if no one can execute it. And that, Meghan, is the problem." The simplicity of the statement was brutal. Executives around the table nodded subtly, as if confirming a fact they had all been grappling with privately. Meghan's defiance faltered. For the first time, she realized the room wasn't going to support her. It wasn't going to defend her. It was going to hold her accountable. And accountability, Meghan learned in that instant, was far more terrifying than criticism. Jennifer flipped the folder open to the next page. This one contained a compilation of internal observations, notes from meetings, production timelines, email chains documenting missed deadlines, and inconsistent messaging. Each entry was precise, factual, and impossible to dispute. One note, in particular, caught everyone's attention. A junior producer had written, "Repeatedly, key meetings have been disrupted by last-minute demands and changes. The team cannot keep pace with the constantly shifting requirements. Morale is low. Direction is unclear." Meghan's hands trembled slightly as she looked down at the document. She had known there were complaints, but seeing them laid out objectively, validated by multiple staffers, brought the full weight of the situation crashing down on her. "You see, Meghan," Jennifer continued, her tone measured but firm. "This isn't about creativity. It isn't about ambition. It's about execution. And unfortunately, the execution has failed." At this point, Meghan's mind was racing. She tried to find an angle, a justification, a flaw in the report. Anything to regain control. But the media coverage, the interviews, the brand positioning, she protested. "You can't ignore the public momentum we've built. People are excited about this." Jennifer's hand rose slightly, a gentle but firm interruption. Media buzz does not equate to deliverable results. Public excitement cannot compensate for a project that is fundamentally flawed. The room was silent again. Meghan's usual rhetorical armor was shattered. She could see it in the eyes of the assistants, the producers, even the executives who had once hesitated to speak candidly. No one was on her side anymore. Not one person. It was a pivotal moment. The kind of moment that defines careers. The kind of moment where confidence meets reality, and reality does not bend. Jennifer closed the folder, leaned back, and allowed the words to settle. "At this point, Meghan," she said, "you have two options. 1. We step in and restructure the project with new leadership. Or 2. We terminate the partnership entirely." Meghan froze. Two options. One path forward. One path that effectively stripped her of control. She tried to process it. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. Because the truth was undeniable. The project, her project, was on the brink of collapse. And yet, Meghan wasn't ready to concede. Not entirely. She tried one last tactic, appealing to Jennifer personally. "I've done everything I can. I've poured myself into this. I know the vision. You know the vision. We can fix this together." Jennifer's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. The calm, collected mask she wore was replaced with something sharper. The kind of edge you don't see until a decision is final, a sentence is delivered, a verdict is sealed. "I understand your effort," Jennifer said evenly, "but effort is not enough. Results matter. And unfortunately, the results do not meet the standard required by Amazon MGM Studios." The words landed like a hammer. Meghan's face paled. She opened her mouth, but nothing coherent emerged. For the first time, she realized that charm, status, and negotiation could not undo months of failure. Jennifer paused for a moment, letting the silence do the work that no amount of eloquence could counteract. Then she added quietly, almost matter-of-factly, "And at this point, Meghan, It is clear that continuing this partnership without structural changes is no longer an option. The subtlety of the phrasing masked the devastation it carried. To Meghan, it was more than a setback. It was a public declaration that her creative judgment had been questioned, her leadership doubted, and her reputation jeopardized. The room held its collective breath. Meghan looked around, eyes darting to the producers, the assistants, the executives. Anyone who might rescue her. But there was no rescue, no escape, only reality. And in that moment, the room collectively understood the gravity of what had been decided. Hollywood was no longer playing by her rules. She was about to face consequences that extended far beyond this meeting, far beyond Amazon MGM. Because what Jennifer Sock was preparing to do next would not just halt a project. It would redefine Meghan Markle's career trajectory in ways no one could yet predict. The folder was still on the table. The documents still laid bare every misstep. The room still charged with tension. And Meghan still clinging to a thread of hope that was quickly fraying. And then Jennifer spoke the words that would reverberate far beyond the walls of that boardroom. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. It started with the emails. Not casual emails. Not polite memos. Not the usual internal correspondence executives exchanged during projects. These were the emails that, once opened, made the entire boardroom hold its collective breath. The emails that had been forwarded and archived, copied and highlighted, collected and labeled, all pointing to one inevitable truth. Meghan Markle had created chaos that went far beyond mere missed deadlines or creative differences. Jennifer Sock leaned back in her chair, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the folder as she prepared to reveal the next layer of evidence. The air in the room was dense with tension. Assistants held their breath. Producers shifted nervously. Meghan, still recovering from the devastating report on her unfilmable pitch, tried to appear composed. But her eyes betrayed her, darting from folder to folder, trying to anticipate what would come next. Jennifer's voice was calm, almost serene, as she began to read aloud. "These emails," she said, "outline repeated instances of behavior that are, frankly, untenable." Meghan frowned. "Untenable. That's dramatic." "Dramatic is not the word," Jennifer replied evenly. "This is factual, objective, documented." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. And then she started reading. The first email was from a producer, sent months earlier, complaining that Meghan had canceled a key meeting with less than an hour's notice. The tone was polite, professional, but the frustration was clear. "This has happened multiple times," the email read. "The team is struggling to stay on track. We cannot finalize schedules if meetings are canceled without notice." Meghan tried to interject. "That was a misunderstanding." Jennifer raised a finger. "Let me finish." The second email was from the head of marketing, detailing a series of social media posts Meghan had requested that contradicted prior agreements. "Campaign messaging is inconsistent," the email said. "These posts risk confusion with our target audience. We've had to pull 2 campaigns at the last minute due to these changes." The third email was the most damaging. It came from one of the executive directors, forwarded multiple times for emphasis. "Meghan has demanded changes to scripts and set designs without consulting the production team. Deadlines have been missed. Team morale is declining. She has refused to acknowledge prior agreements. The project is in jeopardy." The room went silent. Even Meghan's usual fire faltered. She tried to argue again, her voice quivering slightly. "These emails are selective," she exclaimed. "They don't show the full context." Jennifer leaned forward, eyes fixed on her. "Context doesn't change outcomes. The results are what matter. And the results have been consistently negative." The executives exchanged subtle glances. They had all seen the same emails, the same patterns, the same complaints. And now, in this room, with Meghan sitting directly in front of them, they realized the scope of the issue had reached a tipping point. "What's worse," Jennifer continued, her tone deliberate, "is that these behaviors were not isolated incidents. They were systemic. Repeated, documented over months. And each time, we attempted to intervene, to support, to guide. Yet the pattern persisted." Meghan's face hardened. She was searching for a lifeline, a way to redirect, to regain control. "But the team, they understand my vision. They just need time to adjust," she insisted. Jennifer's calm eyes didn't waver. Adjustment requires cooperation. Leadership requires accountability. Neither has been demonstrated sufficiently. Then came the emails that no one in the room had expected. The ones from outside the studio. Leaked communications from previous collaborators, industry contacts, and executives who had worked with Meghan in other projects. Jennifer read aloud one particularly pointed line from a senior producer at a rival studio. Working with Meghan is a lesson in unpredictability. She demands control, but fails to deliver. Our experience suggests this is not a temporary issue. It is a consistent pattern. Meghan's hands gripped the edge of the table. Her voice, usually confident, faltered. That isn't fair. Jennifer's calm, icy gaze pierced through the room. Fairness is irrelevant. What matters is evidence and results. And the evidence is clear. She then brought out the final set of emails. Emails that detailed financial mismanagement, missed deadlines, and repeated disregard for studio protocols. Budget overruns, scheduling conflicts, demands for luxury accommodations, and refusals to accept feedback were all meticulously documented. Every email, every forwarded note, every highlighted complaint painted a picture of a studio under siege, struggling to accommodate a talent who believed her status was invincible. Meghan tried one last defense. I've been under tremendous pressure. The media scrutiny, the public expectations, these are unprecedented circumstances. Jennifer's lips curled slightly, not a smile, not a sneer, but a precise, controlled response. Pressure does not excuse results. Pressure does not excuse repeated patterns of behavior. And pressure certainly does not justify ignoring professional responsibilities. The room was tense. Every assistant, every producer, every executive present felt the gravity of the moment. Meghan's usual confidence had begun to crumble, replaced by a creeping panic that she tried to hide behind composed facial expressions and carefully measured words. And then Jennifer dropped the final bombshell. These emails, Meghan, she said slowly, are only part of the dossier. There is more. There is a record of each missed deadline, each disrupted meeting, each breach of protocol. And most importantly, there is evidence of staff distress directly linked to your behavior. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Meghan opened her mouth, but no words came. She realized that this wasn't about opinion anymore. This wasn't about perception. This was about documented facts. And those facts left her cornered, exposed, and vulnerable. Jennifer leaned back slightly. The calm authority she exuded more intimidating than any raised voice could have been. At this point, Meghan, she said, we have to ask ourselves a fundamental question. Is continuing this partnership in any way viable? The room waited. Every eye was on Meghan. The assistants paused mid-note. The producers stiffened. Meghan, for the first time, experienced the full weight of the situation. She had been cornered by evidence she could not dispute, by professionals whose judgment she could not sway, by a leader who had clearly decided that enough was enough. Her mind raced. Could she salvage this? Could she negotiate a compromise? Could she convince Jennifer and the executives to overlook the mounting evidence, to give her another chance? The answer was clear from the expressions around the table. No one believed it. Not one person. And that's when Jennifer delivered the line that would reverberate across Hollywood for months. This is not about negotiation. This is about accountability. And Meghan, at this stage, the record speaks for itself. The words landed like a gavel strike, final, unyielding, and precise. Meghan's mouth opened, closed, and opened again, searching for any defense, any justification, any lifeline, but there was none. The room had shifted. The balance of power had shifted, and Meghan's carefully constructed image of control had begun to crumble under the weight of indisputable facts. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that charm, status, and perceived influence would not save her from documented failures. Jennifer Sock, sitting calmly behind her folder, had made the unspoken decision clear. The partnership was hanging by a thread, and it would not survive another disruption. Meghan's eyes darted around the room, searching desperately. She sought allies. She sought understanding. She sought mercy. But all she saw were executives and producers who had witnessed the chaos firsthand, who had lived through the unpredictability, who had endured the weeks of disruption and disappointment. And none of them flinched. They weren't there to defend her. They weren't there to support her. They were there to witness the reckoning. And this reckoning was far from over. Because what came next, what Jennifer Sock revealed from the external communications, the leaked reports, and the compiled dossier, would push Meghan into uncharted territory. Territory where careers were ruined, reputations were shattered, and opportunities vanished almost overnight. And that revelation would be the moment that made everyone in the room understand that Hollywood was no longer playing games. But what exactly did Jennifer unveil next? That is the question that leads directly into Chapter 5. Because what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It began with a phone call. Not a casual check-in. Not a routine conversation. Not the friendly call Meghan had imagined would reassure her. No, this phone call was the trigger. The one that would change the trajectory of the meeting and her career before anyone in the room even realized it. The phone, a sleek device resting silently on the polished table, rang. One of the assistants picked it up, glanced at the screen, and hesitated. Everyone in the room froze. The number was familiar to Jennifer Sock, a number tied to a major media executive, someone whose influence extended across Hollywood and beyond. Someone whose words could ignite headlines faster than a viral tweet. Jennifer's eyes narrowed slightly. "Put it on speaker," she said. Her calm tone masked the storm brewing beneath. The assistant pressed a button. The voice came through crisp and direct, immediately setting the room on edge. "Jennifer," said the voice, "we need to talk about Meghan's latest proposals. I've just seen the drafts. There are serious concerns." The words were neutral, professional, yet carried an unmistakable weight. The kind of weight that makes every person in the room lean in slightly, even if they don't want to. Meghan's confident posture faltered. She leaned forward, trying to control the narrative. "I've been refining the concepts. There's nothing wrong with the vision," she said. The voice on the other end of the line, however, was unyielding. "The vision is fine on paper, but execution? It's failing. And we've received multiple reports, emails, memos, internal notes, that suggest your direction is inconsistent and disruptive." A ripple passed through the room. Even the producers who had been quietly observing were shaken. Meghan's eyes widened. Her hand went to her mouth as if the act could somehow shield her from what she was hearing. "Disruptive?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. That's not true." Jennifer didn't flinch. She simply held Meghan's gaze. "You've seen the internal feedback, Meghan. You've received the emails. You know the reports. And now, an external review confirms what we already suspected." The assistant on the call cleared her throat. "We need to discuss next steps." Next steps. Two words that made Meghan's stomach tighten. Because she knew what they implied. She knew that her position in the room, her influence over the project, and perhaps her very future in Hollywood were now in jeopardy. Jennifer continued calmly. "At this stage, we have to make some decisions. Decisions about leadership, direction, and accountability." Meghan's mind raced. Could she negotiate? Could she explain herself? Could she somehow salvage the partnership? She tried, her voice gaining strength. "I've been under tremendous scrutiny. I've been managing multiple responsibilities. Surely, there's room for adjustment. Surely, we can find a way forward." The external voice interrupted. "Adjustment has been attempted. Multiple times. But patterns persist. Delays, confusion, missed deadlines, miscommunications. And most importantly, repeated disregard for studio protocols." The room went quiet. Meghan's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Jennifer, seeking a lifeline. But Jennifer's face was unreadable, neutral, controlled, precise. The kind of control that tells you there is no escape. "You see, Meghan," Jennifer said, finally breaking the silence. "We've given you time, resources, guidance, and support. And yet, the evidence, both internal and external, suggests that the challenges are systemic. Systemic, not temporary, not circumstantial, not a minor hiccup. Systemic." Meghan swallowed hard. Her pulse raced. Her confidence wavered. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that charm, status, and influence alone would not protect her from the consequences of repeated missteps. The external voice spoke again, calmly but firmly. "Jennifer, based on the reports, we recommend reevaluating the partnership entirely. There is a risk to the studio, the project, and the talent involved." Meghan's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the table. Risk? But the vision is strong. The project can still succeed. Jennifer's eyes held her steady. Meghan, the problem isn't the vision. The problem is the execution. And the execution has failed. The words landed like a physical blow. Meghan's mouth opened again, searching for a response, but none came. And then came the most damning moment of all. Jennifer reached for the folder again, flipping to a section labeled Internal Communications. She held up a document. This, Meghan, is a summary of staff feedback, executive notes, and concerns directly tied to your leadership on this project. Meghan's eyes widened as she realized the scope of the evidence against her. Every misstep, every complaint, every delay had been documented. Every internal note, forwarded email, and whispered concern was now laid bare on the table in front of her. You've created an environment of confusion and disruption, Jennifer said slowly, letting each word sink in. Your team is overwhelmed. Your executives are frustrated. And the project is at risk because of decisions you have made. Meghan tried to defend herself, her voice rising slightly. I've been trying to innovate. To push boundaries. To bring something fresh and unique. Jennifer's calm tone never wavered. Innovation is valuable, but only when it can be executed. Only when it can be delivered. Only when it doesn't compromise the team, the budget, or the project itself. The room remained silent. Even Meghan's producers, who had been loyal and supportive, could not offer a single defense. They had witnessed the chaos firsthand. They had endured the constant shifts, the last-minute demands, the disrupted timelines. And now, in the presence of both internal and external validation of the problems, there was nothing left to do but watch the reckoning unfold. Meghan's voice cracked. There must be another way. We can adjust. We can fix this. Jennifer leaned back slightly, her expression as calm as it had been from the start. I'm afraid the record is clear. And the evidence does not support continuing the partnership as it stands. For the first time, Meghan realized the gravity of the situation. The external validation, the documented internal communications, the repeated missed deadlines, all of it converged into a single, undeniable truth. Her position was no longer tenable. And as Jennifer closed the folder one final time, the room held its collective breath. Meghan's mind raced, searching for any possible avenue of escape. Any potential argument. Any loophole. But there was none. And that was the moment the meeting shifted from confrontation to conclusion. Because what came next, the final words Jennifer spoke, the ultimate decision that would seal the fate of Meghan Markle's Hollywood prospects, was about to be delivered. And it would change everything. But what exactly did Jennifer say? That revelation is what leads directly into Chapter 6. Because what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. The room had gone still. Every single person present in the Amazon MGM boardroom felt it. That quiet, almost imperceptible tension that precedes an earthquake. It wasn't just about the emails. It wasn't just about the missed deadlines. It wasn't just about the external review calling Meghan's project unfilmable. No, this was something different. Something heavier. Something that carried the weight of finality. Jennifer Sock, known for her poise, her calm demeanor, and her strategic mind, was about to speak words that would echo far beyond the walls of this meeting. Words that would not only decide the fate of a single project, but potentially determine the trajectory of Meghan Markle's Hollywood career. The silence stretched. Meghan sat there, her hands gripping the table, trying to appear composed. But everyone could see the small signs of panic creeping in. The faint quiver in her lips. The quick dart of her eyes. The subtle tension in her shoulders. Jennifer leaned forward, fingers resting lightly on the folder. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Every word she spoke carried the authority of someone who had the power to shape Hollywood narratives with a single decision. Meghan, she said, her tone deliberate, measured, cutting through the tension like a knife through silk. We've reviewed everything. The reports, the emails, the internal and external communications. We've considered the patterns, the disruptions, the inconsistencies, and we've reached a conclusion. Meghan's eyes widened. Her lips parted. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Because she already knew, deep down, that this wasn't going to end well. Jennifer paused. The room was completely silent. Even the assistant holding Meghan's phone seemed to hold her breath. And our conclusion, Jennifer continued, is that the partnership, as it stands, cannot continue. A single phrase. Simple, clear, devastating. Meghan's mind raced. Could she negotiate? Could she appeal? Could she somehow convince Jennifer to reconsider? I don't understand, she stammered. There must be some way we can adjust. We can restructure. We can bring in more resources. We can. Jennifer held up a hand, stopping her. No, there is no way. We've given you multiple opportunities, Meghan. Support, guidance, resources, time. And the evidence clearly shows that the outcomes are not acceptable. Not for the studio. Not for the team. Not for the project. And frankly, not for your career. The words hit Meghan like a physical blow. Not just a professional critique, but a personal judgment. A declaration that her attempts, her efforts, her influence, and her carefully crafted persona had failed in the eyes of one of the most powerful executives in Hollywood. The room felt colder. The assistants shifted uncomfortably. Producers exchanged subtle, uneasy glances. And Meghan felt a rush of disbelief, followed by a wave of anger. And then, slowly, a creeping sense of helplessness.